everybody. It's Thursday, it's 2 p.m. Eastern, and you know what time that is. It's Bold Leaders in Learning. I'm your host, Brandon Busteed, Chief Partnership Officer and Global Head of Learn Work Innovation at Kaplan. And I'm excited to have a partner of ours in Dr. Mary Ellen Caro, who's the president of Peirce College in Philadelphia. And we are going to have a great conversation today around a topic that I know a lot of you are very interested in, and many of you are already very invested in, which is serving working adult learners and partnering with corporations who are looking to do the same. So, Mary Ellen, first, thanks for carving out the time to join us, and would love to have you tell everybody a little bit about your own background, because that's a fascinating part of our talk today. And then also tell us more about Peirce College.
You bet. Thanks for the opportunity, Brandon, and hello to everyone out there. I'm delighted to be here today. When you first opened up, I wasn't sure if you said bold leaders or old leaders, but in any case,
bold.
Hopefully, I reflect both of those. I previously was in corporate America for 25 years at AT&T. I joined what was a new innovative department at AT&T in marketing, research and forecasting right out of graduate school, where I had worked on applied statistics, no less, of a degree, and wanted to apply that degree to consumer research. So that's where I came from. I then moved up in AT&T and did a variety of executive positions. I was really honored to be able to attend a graduate program at Stanford University as AT&T Sloan Fellow. And that was a real opportunity for me to experience adult education myself. My husband and our 3 children, who at the time were all under the age of 8, our 2 dogs, cats, all moved from the East Coast to Northern California. My husband at that time was able to commute back and do his work. But it was a terrific opportunity to be at Stanford with other professionals from other companies around the globe. And it was just one of the development programs that AT&T engaged in. And the reason I bring that up is, for me personally, to have experienced it and to work for a corporation at the time that really encouraged professional development and invested in it, really showed me for myself the personal enrichment and advantage, and something that I carried with me as I moved forward. I had the opportunity to think about a second career in my life, and what came to my mind and what I was actually approached about was being the founding dean of the School of Business at Thomas Edison State University, a public university in New Jersey that caters to adults. And it was a decision that I would make over and over again, very rewarding. I was there for 14 years and went from being the founding dean to the vice president for student services, and loved every minute of it. And that is really what reinforced my focus on adults in education, but also the focus on corporate partnerships. And that was what my doctoral dissertation was on at the University of Pennsylvania. So that's the quick story of my professional journey. And that brought me to Peirce as the president and CEO in 2018.
And so Peirce, obviously, it's a fascinating institution. I've really enjoyed getting to know it and work with some of your team, and you're just doing incredible things. Tell us a little bit more about the institution. I know it's been through a number of pivots and shifts over the years. It's got a fascinating history, but I'm sure folks would love that context as well.
It really does, and it's interesting. Not everybody knows about the history of Peirce. First of all, it's spelled PEI. So we all struggle with the spelling of it. But because if you spell it a different way, you end up with a community college on the West Coast. But it was founded in 1865 in the Philadelphia region by an educator, Thomas Peirce. And it was founded to educate returning Civil War veterans. So right from the get-go, Peirce had in its DNA applied education, education for those that were non-traditional. Very shortly after it began, it started admitting women. And we have, so for over 150 years, have been educating adults, but also traditional students during some of those pivots that you mentioned. We have the books from those early years in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And you see what the curriculum looked like. It's very heavy in bookkeeping. It's heavy in penmanship and things like that. But it was reflective of the needs at that time. And one of the things I came across that I'd like to share with you that just shows how innovative Peirce was from the beginning is at the time they started, and in the later 1800s, they offered self-paced learning, which is something that a lot of us in higher education have thought was so innovative to bring to the forefront. So, but to make a long story short, Peirce went through pivots where we had students on site in dormitories to exclusively adults, which is where we are now, through all of the changes in higher education needs. Well, I'm told, and I've seen the pictures of an IBM mainframe in the basement at the time that IT professionals were becoming in demand, to now where we continue to look at applied programs, but have branched out into the areas of healthcare, always focused on business and IT, and also liberal studies.
Yeah, and it's a minority serving institution. Roughly 70% of all the students are minority students. And I know we were just talking about your commencement that happened last week, and you had shared that the oldest student who graduated was 68, the youngest was in their early 20s. The average was close to 39, I think is what you said. So that gives everybody an idea of the the incredible population of students that you're serving. And I know you've said it's in the institution's DNA from the beginning, serving, we'll call it non-traditional learners or, working adult learners, but there's a lot of specialized support and services and considerations that go into that. And it would just be great to hear a little bit about how Peirce has organized itself in support of the adult learners that you work with and the corporate partners that you work with, because it's student services in some respect, right? You can call it student affairs, but it's there's some important nuances there.
Well, there really are, and I know most of us in higher ed start with a student-centric philosophy. But what does that really mean when you turn it into tangible actions? And it starts with a nimbleness and a flexibility, things that now are expected by adult students that were innovative and unique in the beginning. Like what? Well, like having courses online with hybrid models where they could come to campus. And up until the pandemic, for example, Peirce offered Peirce Fit courses where on a week-by-week basis, a student can decide to either take that session online or in person. So it's being able to be operationally flexible and realize that students don't all have availability Tuesday at 6 o'clock. And they and also that they benefit, at least ours do, from having shorter classes that run more frequently. So Peirce, for example, has forever run 6 sessions a year of 8 weeks at the undergraduate level and 4 at the graduate level. And then student services, the majority of our students want to conduct their business electronically, either online or over the phone. And now they expect Amazon-like service, so to speak. The days of waiting in line to register for courses that I recall in the ages of the dinosaur are very different. And students also want the ability to decide if they want that extra support or if they want the express lane. And an institution serving them needs to be able to provide both kinds of service and meet the needs of the particular student.
Yeah, and this year in particular, obviously, through a lot of wild cards that all of us, in terms of, whether we were an organization thinking about our employees, our customers, educational institutions thinking about students and the faculty, right? I mean, there's just a lot of that. So one of the things you'd mentioned as we were chatting before we came on live here was about some of the basic needs insecurities that were identified by your students. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that was quite frankly very surprising to us. Now, most of our students are working full time and going to school part time. And it is a challenge, both time management and financially. However, this year, for the first time in my time in higher education, we saw students who were suffering from basic needs insecurities. And what that means is difficulty in keeping up with their bills, things like rent, trying to juggle their expenses with seeing, in some cases, their jobs go away or being downgraded or lower pay. And what we saw through a survey that was done with some agencies in Philadelphia was that the respondents from Peirce indicated that over 70% of them had experienced a basic needs problem. And
Wow.
that for us just was, it was higher than the national average. And in response, we were able, through grants and through our operating budget, to provide students with some assistance. Now, this is apart and separate from financial aid assistance that we receive from the federal government. What we found was just up to about $1,000 a student, we were able to keep over 90% of the students enrolled in school. And we actually took on paying the third parties through this fund for them. And it was just that little bit of help that they needed that helped them stay enrolled and get through the hurdle. So that was a real learning lesson for us. We are seeing the need for third party payers for displaced workers to get back to education or to begin a new career. So the results of the pandemic really affected our underserved students and continue to as well.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it's being reflected in the broader data that we're looking at nationally with enrollments, right? Enrollments are disproportionately
Absolutely.
down at community colleges among students who are Pell eligible, right? And,
That's right.
applications to FAFSA are down, right? So it has, once again, many things we've learned about this pandemic, it's disproportionately, hurt those who are already struggling. And, it's created additional pressures on institutions, especially Peirce, right, where you're serving, a very, very important population. So,
Right. And what we saw was probably just into the pandemic, a a change in students being ready to pull that trigger and enroll. They had gone through, all the work of applying. They went through the evaluation for credit transfer, and they were concerned that they might not be able to, number one, devote the time with homeschooling their kids or doing elder care. And then number two, being able to follow through on their financial commitment, becoming very debt adverse, which you can certainly understand. We see a lessening of that now. And I have to say, we're very grateful as a private, independent, nonprofit institution to have received CARES funding and
right.
America Rescue Plan funding. A large part of it will go directly to serving students and not institutional needs. And that's where we think it ought to be. So we hope to be able to be a very demonstrable part of the Philadelphia region reopening and recovery. And as such, we're working with a lot of corporations to ensure that we have a diverse pipeline for them as they embrace this commitment to bringing back Philadelphia and to developing a diverse workforce. And the whole ecosystem has to work, however.
Yeah, I want to get to some of the corporate partnership work that you guys have engineered, but on that topic that you just mentioned, it's a good and important segue. We're certainly seeing and hearing a lot more talk and discussion across the board, but especially across corporate America, in really investing in developing a diverse talent pipeline. And there have been a number of initiatives for a number of years, right? But I don't know, I have never talked to a corporate leader who feels like they have solved for this problem or even gotten close to solving for it. And to your point, they realize, right, that it isn't, I mean, they have to make certain efforts, but it's also a higher ed issue, right? Like higher ed writ large, even though we like to think about it as a social mobility engine, there's still major equity and access problems coming into higher ed. So therefore, if you're an employer who's looking at hiring people with degrees, you've got, a natural equity issue just because of the graduates coming out of higher ed. So I'm curious, right, as a minority serving institution, what have you guys seen over the last year, if any, around real action from employers, right? Are you seeing more interest in Peirce graduates as a result? Is it still a lot of talk? Maybe a mix of the two? I'm just curious what signals you guys are getting.
To be perfectly frank, it's a mix of the two. We hear a lot of discussions and virtual conferences that talk about how to create a diverse pipeline.
Yeah.
But we're also beginning to have partners approach us. On the whole spectrum of higher ed, saying, we don't have the time to wait 3 years as somebody begins and goes through a college program. We need something to be able to fill up the pipeline that we have in the areas of IT and other areas with individuals that have the hard skills and the soft skills. And what we have done is looked at it not so much as an either or higher ed program or workforce training, but an and, if you will. And working with you all, as well as with our faculty, developed shorter programs that embed credentials that can be and have been evaluated for credit and are part of a modular approach, so that within 6 to 9 months, an individual can get the training that they need with a full surround of those soft skills and critical thinking skills, and then be eligible for a wage that is sustainable and continue their education, hopefully under tuition reimbursement. But that's only part of the picture. And when you referred to that, the whole chain, if you will, at the end of it, the penetration into those corporations has to be met with receptivity and with a focus on channels that may be different than traditional. What do I mean? Just traditional recruiting channels and so forth that check for either a degree or a certain school. And that's the thing we're also working on with receptive employers, to take a look at not only our graduates who are in demand depending upon the field that they're in, but also how do we become integrated into those HR recruiting patterns and systems. And I'm really delighted we have some very large corporations that are dedicating time, attention, and resources to working with us on that, so that these candidates that come through this alternative pathway have a real shot at those positions. Because training, if there's nothing at the end for the person to go to, is not going to be successful at all.
Yep. And you guys have created a number of kind of innovative pathways, right? That I would love to have you explain a little bit your career bridge strategy and some of the examples of the career bridge, because I think it's just very it demonstrates how Peirce is thinking about this, and in a way just providing very direct alignment between where your prospective students are and where they want to get. It's like, what's the fastest, most direct, efficient, and effective pathway there? Maybe just tell us a little bit about a couple of your career bridge examples.
Sure, I would love to. And I need to preface it by saying this whole thing is built on a value system that supports prior learning assessment, that supports the unbundled structure of higher education so that we embrace transfer credit. And we look to create a mosaic for each individual, even in our degree programs. So Career Bridge is a response to that feedback from strata surveys from employers that we work with, to provide timely training that, as I said, can be modularized into programs and is reflective not only of workforce needs, but also the theoretical underpinnings of higher education in the particular discipline. We have launched this. It is on our website, should you care to look, and there are pathways, 6 at this moment, ranging from IT, customer service, cybersecurity, medical coding. Each program is a little bit different, but it is comprised of a certificate or a credential or a test to get that as part of the program, as well as some higher education credit-bearing courses. And the certificate or credential in some cases has also been evaluated. So the student comes out with this credential, with this surround of skills that reflect things like communications skills, some quantitative introduction, and has 16 to 25 credits should they want to pursue further. It's a 5-step program that starts with an assessment of the student's skills. The work that was done in Philadelphia by the Federal Reserve Bank that looked at what are common skill sets between and across different disciplines, like the fact that someone in hospitality management has 70 to 80% of the skills of customer service management, things like that. Bank tellers and financial service sales, which happen to be 2 of the pathways that we're looking at. So you see this commonality of skills. We've identified what other skills through the work with employers are desirable, and then map that to educational outcomes from the academic side of the house. And one other thing I would add, that for Philadelphia in particular and the student set that we serve, having a third-party payer involved and the employer who would be looking to hire these folks, those 2 aspects are really important. We were granted a fund from the Lenfest Foundation, which enables at least 40 students to be able to take Career Bridge programs at no cost to them. And we think as we roll this out, there will be opportunities to use tuition assistance and other things. But it was really important that for displaced workers that we take the financial burden off their shoulders to enable them to enroll in the program.
Yeah, look, it's a brilliant strategy, and I love, I mean, the clarity of saying people in these kinds of roles, right, have a significant chunk of the skills that would be successful in this kinds of roles, because a lot of times they aren't cognizant of that, right? They haven't thought about, oh, I do this, and that has a lot of application there. So creating programs that kind of that spell that out, I think, is exactly, I mean, that's a strategy that I would love to see more and more institutions think about, whether they're short form training programs or things that build into degree programs, right? Like that's where people can start to see, like, oh yeah, I've got potential as this, and I didn't realize that. So
absolutely. And I have to say, I'm seeing more and more of that, at least in our geographic region. And I'd have to give kudos to corporate partners with names you'd all recognize who are doing it within departments and looking at certain workers at a certain level and what skills can map to another level. There's an example in coding for a major company that I've seen, another one in the banking industry. And I really think that kind of partnership can begin to break through in this ecosystem and move us towards really realizing a diverse pipeline that is working.
Yeah. So, on corporate partnerships, right? I know you guys work with a large number of different corporate partners, and there are specific things you need to do to serve and support those relationships, like you do your students, right? I mean, so one's an institutional partnership, one is an individual partnership, but there's some similarities and overlap there. Just tell us a little bit about how you are structuring the support and the teams that you have in place to manage and make sure your corporate partnerships thrive.
Sure, and I can say that in many cases, it's customized around the individual partner. We have large corporate partners, we have nonprofit organizational partners, we have institutional partners that provide students to us, and we have partners like the City of Philadelphia, companies like AmeriHealth, Caritas, and one that I feel that I can name, we've announced it, JetBlue. And the reason I bring these names up is each partner brings to the table at least a commonality with us of viewing their employees as a strategic asset. That's kind of number one, because these partnerships have to have aligned vision. Now, take that part away. The question is, what are you really looking to do? Who are you targeting this education for? And that then drives the amount of work that we can do in terms of prior learning for the individual. What, in some cases, the corporation, the employer wants the students to study. So in many cases, they decide we will fund business tracks, these tracks, and so forth. So we put us around that working with the students that helps them to register into a particular program. We provide coaching for them. And the other thing that we do is to make sure that all their other learning opportunities get folded in. And with JetBlue, from the get-go, we acknowledge there are other educational opportunities that will become part of their educational journey, and we're fine with that. We work with other providers. We think that's important. And we do a lot of credit evaluation and utilize, obviously, the American Council on Education and others that do credit recommendation. So why do I bring up all those points? Because it requires a flexibility on the faculty's part in being open to learning outside of the classroom, because it involves a student support system that is not your traditional come in, because people have transcripts from a variety of places and credit evaluations. And it also necessitates that we understand the corporate culture and exactly how to work with them. If they need us to recruit at 3 o'clock in the morning with a particular shift, we'll do that for them. If they want courses run on site, we'll do that for them. If they want them online, and if there are certain times of the year that there will be peaks and valleys, we need to be able to adjust to that. We obviously find it exciting and rewarding, but it's not for an institution that has a certain way of acting and performing and doesn't want to be flexible.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think that's a good point. As a lot of institutions are thinking about pivots and diversifying revenue and mission strategies and things like that, right? Those who are really, really focused on doing one thing well, or serving a particular type of student in a particular context well, like, these may not be things they pursue, right? It'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. But I know we only got a couple minutes left. I want to ask you about your dissertation, right? You're the first person I've met that's done a dissertation on employer higher ed partnerships. So I want to make sure you share the one or two top insights from what you learned in your dissertation work.
Yeah, and I began my dissertation as part of my doctoral program at Penn as I joined Thomas Edison, because I really wanted to have the theoretical underpinnings. So when it came time to design a dissertation, what I was most interested in was how this connection between the corporate world and higher ed, apart from research and all that stuff, but I mean training programs. What made that successful? And there were some terrific examples that had existed. Pace University with the telecommunications union, and some others that I looked at. And I tried to find commonalities of what made these successful. And I think my point before of having alignment in strategy was important. The other part was many partnerships are fortuitous. You could have a CEO that bumps into
Yeah.
an acquaintance at a corporation that decides we're having a partnership. So they don't always follow a logical path, and the implementation of it can sometimes be very challenging. And also, the second point is knowing how to evolve a partnership when it's either through a certain point in its life cycle and either adjust to new needs or new CEO or something like that. Change in terms of leadership is also important.
Yeah, that's a great summary. It was awesome talking with you. And any employers who are listening in right now who aren't looking at hiring Peirce College graduates, they ought to get on that. So, Mary Ellen, thanks a lot for being part of this. Congratulations on the incredible work you're doing, and look forward to watching your continued success and your students' continued success. So, thanks so much, and thanks everybody for joining us today.
Thank you, Brandon. Thanks, everyone.